Rated the #1 podcast of all time.
Of all time.
Oh.
Make sure you're ready, because this is the podcast where you are guaranteed to learn virtually everything. All right, today's episode is brought to you by Ting. So visit bcs.ting.com, BCS for the Brian Callen Show, .ting.com, for a $25 service credit or device discount. You know, the thing is, when you start getting a popular podcast, people come and say, we want to sponsor it. But for me, you know, I've got to believe in the product. I just have to. I know about Ting from Joe Rogan, who I believe uses the service. I've heard nothing but good things. And let me explain to you why Ting is a good and responsible product. And this is why I'm actually promoting them on the Brian Callen Show. There are no contracts, okay? There are no bundling or ride-along services, no overage charges, no penalties. You get credits for unused service. There are no add-on charges, no mysterious line items on your bill. Unlimited devices on one plan is great. It's got a powerful online account control panel, okay? So you can do all kinds of stuff online. And there's no hold customer support. How's that sound? Huh? You don't hold, okay? So for having said all that, the bottom line is it's a pay-as-you-go service. The service is basically a la carte to your needs. When you don't want the service anymore, you can get out, all right? That's what I call a responsible, ethical company. And I first learned about it through Joe Rogan doing his podcast, and I'm proud they're sponsoring this podcast now. So you know, that's kind of my pitch for Ting. I think it's a very good company. As soon as they get it paired up with the iPhone 5, I am going to switch over. I like it. It sounds like a great service. So let me once again encourage you to visit bcs.ting.com, and you'll get a $25 service credit or device discount. All right, everybody, this is the Brian Callen Show, and my dear and very old friend David Blaine is here. David, how you doing?
And it's true, I am an old friend, literally.
Hold that mic close to your because you've got so much soda
kids,
in your
we're
voice.
Not kids anymore, but I did meet Brian when I was a teenager.
Yep.
And
I saw one of your first magic tricks, didn't I? I mean, sort of.
No, but you saw me do my first performance.
Right, I saw your first sort of performance.
Yeah, when I was trying to figure out what magic was to me and what it meant, and the reason you've been so important in my life is because as a teenager, you were a little older than me, and you recommended so many incredible books, and you told me about so many extraordinary people, and you opened my eyes in so many ways. And one of the best quotes you ever said to me, and I think I was 18 when you said this, and it was very important to me because I grew up pretty much with just my mother. She did get remarried, but my mother was the main figure in my life. Mm-hmm. And so I always felt like a kid with a mother who just let him do, even though she also led me in the right way and had me reading books since I was a little boy. But I didn't have a father figure, and you had such a great father figure, and you would tell me some of the quotes that he gave to you. And one of the quotes that you told me was, always surround yourself with people that are going to help you grow. And you said that at the right age, because I was just, trying to figure out who I was and trying to learn as much as I could at that age. And that specific quote reminded me that it is important to spend time trying to learn and trying to grow and trying to improve.
Hold the mic close, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what I appreciate that compliment, but I will say that, you also had the wherewithal to be hungry and to be curious. And one of the things that I'd love to take credit for some of your success, but the truth is, in my opinion, having known you from a very early age and watching you develop, you've always been fascinated with the human condition. And more importantly, I think you've always been fascinated with struggle and overcoming adversity and what it takes to be, quote unquote, great. And great's a big umbrella. But that's always kind of what your reading of Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, and those kinds of people. You were always a searcher. Even as a kid, you were fascinated and were able to tell the difference between people of significance and people who were not. I'm not as good at that as you are at all.
Why? No, I actually think everybody's important in a way, but even though a lot of people are important, a lot of people, tend to go with their impulses or their, the temptations much more than others, and I fall into that category often. But it's like, nice to be reminded that, what we just talked about, that, like when the reason you do what you do, or the reason I do what I do isn't actually a selfish reason. It's that we love to give people, something from within us that's very personal, that we've spent a lot of time working on, and that means the world to us.
Well, that's something that I've always noticed about you, and I know this to be true in your heart. You've never been motivated by money, and you've never been motivated by fame, and you still are not, and that's a fact. I know, and I tell people this, but I won't say it. We won't get into details. I know for a fact that you've said no to serious money, because you didn't feel like it represented who you were.
Well, no,
and it was a compromise.
I just always feel like it's best to work hard for what, I like having to work really hard for things, so I don't like anything that comes too easy. It's always been that way.
What do you think your fascination, though, with, Nazi concentration camp survivors? Well, what is your fascination with people that overcome adversity like that, the extremes?
I mean, first of all, I'm Jewish. Second of all, my mother lived a very hard life. And, when she suffered with cancer and fought that battle, she was always so optimistic and always so, encouraging. And so it was amazing to me. And I think that really began my obsession with the Holocaust and what people went through. And then I found guys like Viktor Frankl or Primo Levi, and it's incredible to see people that can come out of such a horrific condition with something so enlightening or so beautiful.
Yeah, I remember you kind of going through your mother's death, and I remember going to your mother's funeral, and she was so important to you. And those seminal moments are kind of what when we go through something terrible, you have a choice whether to react in a positive or a negative way. You obviously reacted or used that tragedy
in both ways
to become a stronger person. Sure. I mean, there's a great deal of mourning for people, I think, that can sometimes go on for a lifetime, or certainly 10 or 20 years. But can you remember seminal
funny,
moments?
By the way, that we're sitting here in a smoke-filled room.
I know,
because we were just practicing something.
We were practicing something, and it smells like lots of smoke. But can you remember the thinkers, the writers, the books that sort of changed everything for you?
Yeah, that's an easy question for me. So the first book that my mother gave me when I was about 11 was Siddhartha, which really left an imprint on my brain. Yep.
Great book.
It was really, really important to me. But I mean, all of the other books that she read to me as a little kid, it started, Shel Silverstein, The Giving Tree, and all of the Dr. Seuss, and, everything that I used to sift through and read. I think, there was a really amazing study that was done. They took 500 kids, I think it was 500, from inner city schools, and they took a bunch of kids that were really terrible math students. They couldn't learn math. They were all pretty much on par, failing everything, and just weren't doing well. So this woman took 500 kids, I believe, split them into 2 equal groups, and gave them the exact same curriculum.
I know this study is fascinating.
It's amazing, right? So what they did is, from one half of those kids, they would teach 40 minutes a day, 4 days a week, or whatever it was. And the other half, they would teach 10 minutes less per day. So it was they had much less math instructions and lessons going on, but for those extra 10 minutes a day that totaled maybe 40 minutes a week, they were taught that their brain is a muscle that can grow.
That's great. That's
and
exactly
because
right.
These kids were taught that, their brain actually absorbed the information significantly better. So I think their scores were 80% higher than the kids that were learning math more, but weren't taught for 10 minutes a day that their brain is a muscle that can grow.
Right. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it's
so it's context. So you would probably agree that a lot of success is the emotional framework in which you approach life. I mean, so in other words, positive attitude, or even just knowing that you are capable of something. They've also done studies where they broke up two groups of students. They told one group, "You're really gifted. We've done some studies on you. You're insanely gifted."
That's right.
And the other ones, they didn't tell them. And the kids that were gifted, guess what?
Yep.
Blew through every score and crushed. So much of it is
no.
Mm.
The kids that they told were gifted and were doing so great, when they did the second test, their scores were much lower because they were afraid of not being as gifted.
No, that's right. But here's what I meant.
They complimented on the hard work that they were doing.
Yes.
They said, "You are working so hard on that."
Right. That's what I meant.
Those ones excelled. That's really funny.
And by the way, but the other thing that they said is this: we've done a bunch of studies on you, and we can tell from our studies that you're going to have a spike in your intelligence somewhere in the middle of the year. And guess what? They all did. So, and you kind of, we don't have to talk too much about magic because I'm more interested in the man behind the magic. But a lot of that kind of stuff is suggestion. A lot of that kind of stuff is learning how the human mind works. I mean, I would imagine, and knowing what human tendencies are. I mean, you become a better magician when you...
I think you become for me personally, I become a better magician by failing, by going out there and messing up, because you have to learn how to quickly adjust. But
let's talk about that more, because I have a lot of young people that listen to this, and I always say that to young people. I love what you just said, because so much of people think that success is easy in some ways, and in fact you fail way more than you succeed when you are looked at as a success, right?
Yeah, I think that's why LeBron James is so incredible, because failure doesn't mean anything to him. He just goes, like nothing can stop the guy. You know what I mean? So you can see it in him. You could see he'll get knocked down repetitiously, but he just keeps going like a bull.
Yeah.
I don't really watch that much, but watching, anybody that's like that, like Kobe Bryant when he got taken down for the whole scandal, which, it obviously was a huge impact to him, but he became the best he played better than he ever played.
Yeah,
so
he just kept going.
Having everything against him made him even stronger and hungrier, basically, and made him excel in the one thing that he loved.
That's right.
That's right. Although the proper school of thought, I think, for magic is you practice. You sit in a mirror, you practice. I've just never.
Isn't that the way it is for everything, though? I know with stand-up, you learn how to allocate your space. You learn how to talk to yourself, because so much of life is when you're walking through life, there are so many distractions, man, and they're beautiful distractions.
Yeah,
I'm talking about everything.
Yeah, it's terrible.
But so much of it is learning how to not only talk to yourself properly, but allocating your mental space. And you can get good at that. Like you said, it's a muscle. You can get really good at just learning how to shut off your brain to certain things, not indulging in those thoughts before they happen, and gently steering your mind back to what you're supposed to think about. Yeah. That's what I do anyway. I mean, I don't know.
That's what you're amazing at, and that's what I need to learn how to do. And that's why I think I do those stunts. Is I think it's like a rare time that I really get complete focus and clarity.
Yeah.
It's like, because when I go back to life, it's like, the real world, I get distracted so easily. It's really crazy.
That's interesting. So it's kind of like your temple. You kind of go into this.
And I'm also a last-minute worker. It's like I wait till everything is as late as possible, and then I work in overdrive. But like if I have a month to do something, I probably, okay. And then 3 hours before, I'm working like a maniac.
You're an extremist.
It's really bizarre.
You're a crammer.
It's not good.
Do you think you're an extremist?
Yeah.
You are.
Terrible.
Why do you think that is? Do you have any idea? Hard to say, right?
I think it goes back to early childhood.
It's also what makes you so successful in a weird way. I mean, kind of like your biggest liability is also your biggest strength, right?
No, I think the thing that allows me to work as a magician is really, I always try to do the opposite of what I see, because usually everything that I see, I usually think, but the things that I see when I do magic are so different. Like, what I see is, just like a person's emotion. Or it's weird because magic is an art of deception in a weird way, but for me, it's kind of like an art of finding truth. So it's really...
What do you mean?
I mean, it's like what's amazing to me in magic is the truth that's created. Like, I guess it's kind of like...
So in other words, you see people, when you see somebody actually react like, right, oh my God.
Right, when there's a believable, and if it's not, if it's like pushed or forced, or my sensor buzzes.
It's a little bit like this guy who said, "I like porn when I believe the actors, not when I don't."
Yeah. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Most porn, if I see the girl faking, I'm like, oh, whatever. But if I think she's really into
if
it,
you think it's real, it's like,
wow.
It's with acting. If you think somebody's like just like anything, if you believe it, there's like That's how I heard Gene Hackman. Somebody said, "Well, the reason he's a great actor is because I believe everything he does." Right.
And I was like, "Geez, that's a pretty authentic way of describing somebody."
And didn't Robert Duvall say, in order to be a great actor, all you need is 20 years of experience?
Yeah, that's right. All you need is 20 years. Let me ask.
A pause.
Yeah, I had to pause with David because he's going to take care of something. But I'm sitting in his. I'm in his office. Well, it's really kind of an apartment office because he's got another apartment. But he's a minimalist. He's not into a lot of crap. He's got a couple black boots, a whole bunch of black T-shirts, a very sparse bed, and I'm surrounded by videotapes, no DVDs, videotapes, and what looked like almost VHS tapes, just from years and years of magic and performances of other people. And he draws a great deal of inspiration from other people, which is really interesting. He has these framed photographs of his heroes, from Muhammad Ali to Jimi Hendrix to different painters and stuff. And he's always feeding himself. There's nothing wrong with basically gaining your inspiration from other people. I would argue that that's where you get it from a lot of times. Yes, music and stuff, and your own mind and your own heart, I guess, and your faith or whatever, but there are a lot of people that have set examples before you, and that's what's interesting. That's certainly what I do. What I try to do is, there are a lot of people that I just go, damn, you shame me with your effort and your courage and your originality. And I think David feels the same way. There's nothing wrong with admiring people. You don't have to admire the total person, but admiring, pieces of the person, what they have done, not necessarily the other things they've done, but the central through line of their life. That's what to look at. That's kind of like finding the good in somebody and praising it. That's kind of like the example of, there was always like rumors and maybe even a lot of fact to Martin Luther King having had extramarital affairs. Are you going to focus on that? Are you going to focus on the guy that stood up against the hoses, etc., and set the example, and the rest is history? I think I'd rather focus on that. They say Gandhi took a vow of celibacy because his mother died while he was banging another woman behind his wife's back. That's what I hear. I don't know if that's true, but certainly a substantiated rumor. And it's kind of what led him to say, I'm not going to have sex at all anymore. I'm not going to focus on that. I'm going to focus on kind of what he chose to do. And what he chose to do, by the way, the through line between people like Gandhi, Martin Luther King, is they put themselves, their very being, their physical appetites, their being, beneath principle. And that's what's so amazing. Those are the people we actually admire. Those people that say, I am more than my appetites. I'm more than this flesh and blood. I'm more than even my screams of pain. There is something bigger than I am. And that's, I suppose, the ultimate measure of a man, and probably the best way to define a hero. So we'll be back with David Blaine after these brief messages. And by the way, I'm going to be at the Fort Lauderdale Improv June 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd. And we're back. There's so much. I watch you prepare for stuff, and there's so much to it, man. There's so much work to it. A lot of it's not that fun for the end result, right?
No, I think the whole process is fun.
Do you like the process sometimes? Because for me, like, you want to know the truth about stand-up for me? I like writing it more than I like writing it and working out the beats and getting it perfect more than I like performing and even the laughter and accolades. I swear to God.
Wow.
After a while, you get inoculated to that incredible reaction. The crowd loves you and laughs. That's always great. What I really like is the process of discovery. Discovering, because I believe
why you have to write a movie?
Well, I am. That's what I'm doing right now. Yes.
You have a part for a magician?
Yeah, I've always said, I'll say it on the podcast. I've always said I've seen you act. I think you should do a movie. I think you could win an Oscar. I said it on when we did that biography thing. I said
that's insane, but I would love to do something with you.
Well, I'm gonna have something. I'm gonna have a project that I'll be done with soon that I think is gonna be amazing. But that's kind of the idea. Like, I really like the idea of, like, when you write a story, or when you have an hour, like I'm working on my next hour special. I like the notion that it already exists in perfection. It already exists. It already exists up there somewhere, in its perfection. And it's up to you to keep showing up. To keep, like, if you keep showing up, it reveals itself to you slowly.
That's
it's kind
what
of an
Henry
act of
Ford
faith.
said in the opening of his autobiography. He says, the car existed. I was just an antenna that was able to receive the signals.
I love that, because that's what the guy who won the Fields Medal said as well. He said,
it's already out there.
It's already out there. I just happen to have a frequency
I
that
actually
can...
agree with that.
You do?
Yeah. I agree with that completely.
Did you ever want to write? Do you ever want to write a book or anything? Did you ever want to express yourself in another medium besides magic?
Magic's my favorite. I mean, it's something I've done since I was 4 or 5, so it's kind of like everything to me.
Huh. Yeah. So you don't feel the need to dilute that expression with something else.
No, but studying acting was really productive. You know, the Orson Welles quote was, "A magician is just an actor playing the part of a magician." I think before I took it seriously when I met you, I think learning how to present things in a believable way, which is acting, you know, living truthfully in an imaginary circumstance, basically, is a
huge part of what you do.
I think it's the most important part of making magic interesting, because otherwise it's all just, you know, silly tricks. But when presented in the right context, it's actually something very interesting and almost moving.
Absolutely.
There's a famous book in the magic world called Magic and Showmanship. It's by Henning Nelms, and he explains magic like this. He says, if I just made you reach into your pocket right now, and there was a sandwich in your pocket, you'd say, oh, that's a cool trick. How do you do that? But if you said to me, David, I'm hungry, I'd love a sandwich, and I say, reach into your pocket, and now you pull the sandwich out, it's two different contexts, and one is amazing and the other is a neat trick.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really interesting distinction.
That's cool, right?
Yeah. What your work has kind of exposed you, and as you get older, for me, you meet a lot of people, and you meet a lot of significant people. Meet people that kind of like have a lot of money or who are very successful in something. And a lot of times, what you kind of, as you get older, the mystery of life kind of starts to devolve in the sense that you go, well, you just worked really hard, you had a talent for something, and you struggled a lot, and you had a very good system of sort of work and a good mind that led you to this place. So it's not as impressive necessarily as you become more accomplished. But of the people that you've met, and you've met a lot of them, is there anybody who stands out, or any 3 people that really stand out as really impressive people that are almost your heroes in a sense? Do you have any heroes?
And my mother's my first and foremost hero.
Watching her struggle through her cancer?
No. Just her whole value on life. I mean, she grew up with a very wealthy family, but left her family at age 18, moved to Brooklyn, and, did everything, taught kids in inner city schools, and really tried to help people. And she, she lived a pretty free life that wasn't revolved around anything materialistic. I think she got sick of it growing up. So she taught me at a young age not to value things that have no real meaning, I was pretty lucky to have a mother like that. But she would, read to me all the time, or take me to museums and just show me things and teach me. And
she exposed you to what's out there, what's possible,
important.
how high the bar was.
And she never had any limitations, like anything. She believed everything was possible, basically, but not in a silly way.
Is there an artist or someone, a writer, somebody who sets the bar for you, who awes you in their accomplishment, that nags at you, that pushes you to be better, greater?
I mean, anytime there's so many people. It's infinite. Any artist that I admire that just worked really hard and hit that chord, whether it's Michael Jackson or Robert De Niro or Woody Allen or Stephen Hawking, or everybody that I read about that I love, and their stories and or Kafka, or Dostoevsky, how they used difficulties or their trials and tribulations to push through and do things that were, that shouldn't be possible, or that nobody could do. So yeah,
it's that great quote we were talking about with what's his name, who walked the tightrope between the World Trade Center. He said, they said, "What do you think?" And he said, "It's impossible. Now let's get to work."
Philippe Petit. Yeah, he's
Philippe
amazing.
Petit. Yeah.
He's very generous, too, as an artist, because when I was filming my first show, Street Magic, he was just walking by on the street, and I knew who he was. And he came up to me while I was doing it, and he basically was also a magician. So he helped me do the magic to the crowd, and they went nuts because he challenged me, but while switching cards into play and everything like a fellow magician that's unselfish would do.
Wow.
And then he just walked off, and the crowd went nuts.
Wow.
Yeah,
and
he's
did you
just
knew
that
who he
kind of
was?
guy. I knew who he was. He didn't know me. I was just a young magician.
Wow. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That's amazing. And I went to your house one time, and you had a library of books, some of which were written in Latin on magic.
Which I still have. Yeah.
You still have. How many of those books have you read or had read to you?
Well, yeah, I have the originals in Latin, but then I have the English version. So I actually read them in English.
Wow.
Yeah, and
It'd be really impressive if you read them in Latin.
No, but my friend does. But it's difficult, but you can make out some things. But
right.
No, but
yeah,
there
your
are
buddy
very
does. Yeah.
Yeah, Bill. There are very old books on magic that my friend, who has a library, Conjuring Arts Research Center, has translated every single different book, so anybody has access to it, and it's lots of information. It's pretty incredible.
You think that you're going to always do magic? Can you chart and see your life?
Magic till I die.
Magic. I feel that way about stand-up. Stand-up till I die.
Yeah.
Acting. Stand-up is like that just sort of. I even like the travel, and I even like the hotels, and I even like the loneliness. I like it all.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. You always feel kind of like at magic, and I think stand-up in the same way is a very solitary existence in some ways. You're always in your own head coming up with ideas. What's the best angle? What's the best way to do this? What's the best way to kind of awe a crowd, right? I mean, I think stand-up is basically a magic trick. I always say it. I think comedy is surprise. I always tell, comics, don't try to write funny. Try to surprise and shock yourself. And if you do that and you're coming from an honest place, you're going to elicit the same reaction from them.
The 3 words that I've written up on my wall right here that I think are the most important words in magic, it's MIB. And those letters stand for, is it meaningful? Is it interesting? And is it believable? So that's kind of like the code to magic for me.
Meaningful, interesting, believable. You know what? I think you could apply the same thing to stand-up. I really do.
For sure.
I mean, first of all, I always say, if you're going to write stand-up, please don't write trying to be funny. First, mind your head and your heart and figure out what you think about. And I always say, ask yourself what you're afraid of. You know how I write? I go, what am I afraid of? Who do I wish I was? And what am I ashamed of? Those are the 3 things I actually work at.
My brother's a stand-up comedian in L.A. and he
never says hi to me.
He's obsessed with you, though. He loves you, so I know he's going to be listening.
Well, why don't you have him come say, "Hang"? If he's your brother, obviously, I'm going to take him. I'm going to hang out with him.
I would love that. And
why don't you call me and tell me, "Hey, my brother, is around. I'll, if I can do stuff for him."
Well, but anyway, he's the reason I was referring to him is because as a stand-up, he applies the same. We're very different, but we're very similar. And I know that he thinks the same way as me, but an even way more extreme version of it. But he's so bright and so talented in the things he says, Brian. But
well,
anyway,
you kind of really moved me because your TED speech, and I recommend everybody go see your TED speech. You say, I think you mentioned your brother was there.
Yeah.
And you kind of like broke down at the end. Can you explain what you said and why? Like what was behind that? Do you know?
Yeah. Well, I just I think that was more about the work that goes into everything, because I think usually when people see it, me as a magician, they think, oh, it's all tricks or da da da. You could buy it in a magic store, but it's really not like that. It's actually like laborious hours and hours and years and years and years of sacrifice and work that goes into trying to trying to do the right thing with magic or with the art of magic.
Or
And
holding your breath for longer than
right,
anybody in the world.
Which is, and obviously when you hold your breath every day for a couple of years, it destroys brain cells and your memory starts to evaporate. And I can't remember anything like I used to, but so
he sacrificed your fucking brain's well-being to break a world record. But
I was so nervous to give that talk because it was in front of a room of all of these people that I admire and respect, like Steve Wozniak and all these Nobel Prize winners and Craig Venter and just all of these scientists and doctors. And so
I always talk about Craig Venter. He's another genius. He's in synthetic biology and etc.
So I was extremely nervous, and Richard Warman made me the last talk, and at the end, I said, basically what magic is to me is it's practice and training and experimenting while pushing through the pain to be the best that I can be. And I think when I said that, I felt like it summed up like all of the work that I put into it. So I kind of choked up, and it was also the stress of being there and actually talking about this and trying to be.
You know what, man? You know what? You can never look bad when you're vulnerable. Yeah, it's kind of a beautiful thing. It moved me. And I was just thinking about how so much of our life is spent trying not to be vulnerable and trying to be tough or trying to act like things don't bother us. And in a weird way, when you're vulnerable, you see somebody break down and it's honest. It just never looks bad. It kind of brings you closer to the person because they are expressing what exists in you. Maybe that's kind of what high art does. It makes you laugh and cry.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I'm a fucking really interesting guy, so
you are very interesting.
Please.
That's for sure.
Please.
You also have serious pecs going on there.
I have a good body. Let's not kid ourselves. Your body changes drastically.
I think in the last decade I've gained, and I'm not kidding about this, I think I've gained and lost about 1,000 pounds.
You're such an extremist, and I believe that. Yeah, you can go from just huge and muscular and sick, and then the next 3 months you're just like whatever. You just stop
I've
everything.
Into organ failure, and I go through all these crazy things for these things.
These stunts.
Yeah, everybody close to me, just do the card tricks, but the stunts are basically really in a weird way like, I like to try to make them into cool images, but they're really kind of personal as well. So I think it's like a really difficult journey or task that I try to give
But how do you keep yourself motivated? How do you talk to yourself when you're going through hunger and thirst and claustrophobia and just isolation? I mean, how do you...
I think that's stuff I'm really good at. I was always good at things like that. Even when I was a kid and I got in trouble and they'd say, oh, go stand in the corner. I'd be like, it's easy.
What's driving you? Competition? The idea that you can beat your own mind, or what is it? Do you draw a blank and not talk to yourself?
I just like being able to do something that seems really different. So it's weird, It might even be as simple as just numbers. Like when I was holding my breath as a kid, I just wanted to get to 3.5 minutes. So I worked really hard to get there, and I would get to 3:20, 3:22. So it might just be something like I set a goal that I feel I can't do, and then I try to get to it.
It's funny about the way you talk, because I always ask like successful people what kind of drives them, and everybody has their own motivation. And a lot of times people don't even need to know their motivation. Whatever works for you works. The main thing is that you're doing it.
Yeah, I think it's pretty simple like that.
Well, I know you got a lot of work to do on this upcoming incredible thing you're going to do. So I'm going to let you go.
Well, thank you for being here, Brian.
Thank you for 23 years of friendship, my friend. You're one of the special ones, and thank you for doing the Brian Callen Show. I need a cooler name.
And now should we just go cuddle?
Let's go cuddle, brother. Let's go cuddle. I want to go eat. I got to go do this thing. I got to shoot something. Thanks, guys, for listening. That's David Blaine, the one and only.
Thank you, Brian. You fucking rule.
You've been listening to The Brian Callen Show. Be sure to visit briancallen.com for information about this episode as well as past and future episodes. You can follow Brian on Twitter @BrianCallen and like him on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/BrianCallenComedy. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.